Myatka, Burma, August 1944. After the liberation of Myatka on August 10, 1944, following a 78-day siege, American forces made an important discovery that would produce the first detailed record of Japan's comfort women system. 20 Korean women and 2 Japanese civilian comfort station workers had been captured. The U.S. Office of War Information's Psychological Warfare Unit carried out interrogations that became Japanese. Prisoner of War Interrogation Report Number 49. This was the first official American record of what would later be known as one of the largest systems of sexual slavery in modern history. The women told the interrogators that they had been recruited in Korea in 1942 with promises of factory work in Singapore. Instead, they were taken through Rangoon to the Burmese frontier as part of a larger group where they were forced into sexual slavery. The report, first declassified in 1973, described their living conditions, how the stations worked, and the systematic nature of what the Japanese military politely called comfort stations. What American forces were discovering across the Pacific was shocking and hard to understand. Historian Yoshimi Yoshiaki later wrote that there were nearly 2,000 comfort stations from China to the Dutch East Indies, with about 200,000 women enslaved. From the jungles of Burma to the ruins of Manila, from the mountains of China to the islands of the Dutch East Indies, Allied forces found women who had survived systematic sexual slavery on a huge industrial scale. On September 7, 1944, less than a month after Myatka, another key record came from Shan in China's Yunnan province, when U.S.-China Allied forces freed Korean comfort women during their attack on Japanese positions. Private Charles Hatfield of the U.S. Army's 164th Signal Photo Company took what became one of the most important photos showing comfort women being freed. The photo showed 4 Korean women, one clearly pregnant, being led to safety by Chinese soldiers. Sergeant Edward Fay recorded motion picture footage of the same liberation. These images, now kept in the U.S. National Archives, gave visual proof that would be very important many decades later. The pregnant woman in the photograph would later be identified as Park Young-sim, though it would take 56 years before she could publicly tell her story at the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal in Tokyo in 2000. According to military records of the original 24 comfort women at Shan, only 10 survived until liberation. 14 had been killed during the bombings before the Allied attack. The Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, ATIS, set up on September 19, 1942 under Colonel Sidney F. Masher's command, became the main intelligence unit documenting the comfort women system. By 1945, ATIS had grown to almost 4,000 personnel, mostly Nisei Japanese Americans, processing thousands of captured documents that showed how the system of sexual slavery worked. ATIS Research Report Number 120. Amenities in the Japanese Armed Forces, sent directly to General MacArthur, gave the most complete Allied record of the system. The November 15, 1945 edition of the report grew to 42 pages from February's 22 pages and included captured Japanese military regulations as annexes. These documents, now kept in U.S. National Archives record groups 165, 331, 407, and 554, at first classified comfort stations under amusements or brothel instead of war crimes, reflecting the understanding of that time that would take decades to correct. The captured regulations showed standard procedures across the Pacific. The Huayu Comfort Station Regulations from Nanjing, dated March 6, 1939, listed medical exam schedules, fees based on military rank, working hours, and required use of condoms. Mandalay Garrison Headquarters had 30 detailed regulations, officially calling women licensed prostitutes while keeping strict military control. Military transport papers showed Army cargo ships moved comfort women from Japan and Korea, needing special Ministry of War permission. Railway orders showed women were transported in freight cars marked as military supplies. Every movement needed multiple approvals, 3 sets of forms, and official seals, showing bureaucratic proof that lasted even when other records were lost. The words in these documents purposely hid the truth. Special service personnel meant sex slaves. Comfort facilities meant rape. Stations. Medical treatment often meant forced abortion. Amenities officially called systematic rape, entertainment. This use of polite language affected how comfort women were seen and treated during liberation, with many women falling through bureaucratic categories. They were neither prisoners of war, civilian internees, nor military personnel. The liberation of the Philippines from October 1944 to July 1945 revealed the largest network of comfort stations American forces would find. The U.S. 1st Cavalry Division entered Manila on February 3, 1945, racing to free Santo Tomas University, where 3,785 Allied civilian internees were held. They passed through city districts where comfort stations had been running for 3 years. Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SKP, records later showed 12 comfort stations and 5 brothels in Manila alone. More stations were found across the islands. Bayonbong in North Luzon, Masbate in Central Visayas, Iloilo on Panay Island with 2 stations holding 12 to 16 and 10 to 11 women respectively. Cebu, Tacloan on Leyte with 9 Filipino women. Bawan on Leyte, Butan on Mindanao with 3 Filipino women. Cagayan on Mindanao with 3 stations total, and Davao on Mindanao with comfort women of mixed nationalities. The 37th Infantry Division fought fierce city battles across Manila during the month-long Battle of Manila, which lasted until March 3, 1945. The 148th Infantry Regiment freed the Philippine General Hospital and the University of the Philippines on February 17, 1945, releasing 7,000 civilians. During these actions, American forces systematically uncovered comfort stations in the Malate, Binondo, and Quiapo districts. Financial records taken from Japanese 14th Area Army Headquarters revealed the economic exploitation behind the system. Women had to pay for food, clothing, and medical care, with costs often higher than their earnings, creating debt bondage. Military paymasters managed all transactions, and women never got real money. Payment vouchers showed soldiers were charged by rank. 2 yen for privates, 3 yen for NCOs, and officers had special arrangements. Among those freed in the Philippines was Maria Rosa L. Henson, born December 5, 1927, though she had been rescued earlier by Filipino guerrillas working with American forces. In February 1942, at just 14 years old, she was first assaulted by Japanese soldiers. In April 1943, she was forced to work as a comfort woman for 9 months. Philippine guerrillas saved her in January 1944, as American forces were preparing to return to the Philippines. Henson would become the first Filipino woman to publicly tell her story in 1992, breaking nearly 50 years of silence. She later became one of the first recipients of the Asian Women's Fund project in 1996. Her testimony gave crucial evidence about how comfort stations worked in the Philippines and how local guerrilla forces helped in liberation operations. Nothing had prepared American forces for what they would find on Okinawa when the invasion began on April 1, 1945. Intelligence reports had suggested that several comfort stations might be there, but the reality was far beyond what anyone could imagine. Historical records show over 145 stations on an island only 70 miles long. During the Okinawa Campaign, which included the 1st and 6th Marine Divisions among others, comfort stations were found in every major town and military base. Naha alone had 17 former comfort stations. Military intelligence reports documented women from Korea, Taiwan, and Okinawa, with some as young as 14 years old. The fast Japanese collapse in some areas led to unexpected discoveries. Near Shuri, the old capital, Marines from the 1st Division found cave complexes where Japanese forces had hidden Korean comfort women. Military reports said these women were told that Americans would torture and eat them. This was propaganda the Japanese used to make them choose suicide rather than be captured. Some women had been given hand grenades and told to kill themselves instead of being captured. The amount of documentation needed on Okinawa was huge and overwhelmed the available translators. By May 1945, ATIS had sent 3 full translation teams to the island, processing thousands of documents about comfort station operations. The bureaucratic details were extensive and very complicated. Duty rosters showed women were forced to serve 30 to 40 men per day during busy periods. Medical records documented forced abortions and sterilizations. Payment ledgers showed the military controlled every part of the system financially. The Military Intelligence Service, MIS, mostly made up of Nisei Japanese Americans, played a key role in recording comfort women discoveries. Merrill's Marauders, 5th 307 Composite Unit Provisional, led by Brigadier General Frank D. Merrill, operated behind Japanese lines in Burma all through 1944, using 14 Japanese-American MIS translators who were crucial for questioning captured comfort station personnel. After Merrill's Marauders disbanded on August 10, 1944, the Mars Task Force under Brigadier General John P. Will took over. This unit included the 475th Infantry Regiment and the 124th Cavalry Regiment, each with teams of 12 Nisei language specialists who continued liberation operations in northern Burma. These translators faced huge challenges. The women spoke Korean, Chinese, Tagalog, Indonesian, Dutch, and many local dialects. Many Korean women had been forbidden to speak their own language for so long that they struggled even with Korean translators. Cultural barriers made it almost impossible to discuss sexual trauma, and many women refused to speak to male translators. The translators worked through documents that showed the system's racial hierarchy. Korean women were Class A, Chinese women Class B, and Southeast Asian women Class C. Different stations served different ranks. Officer-only stations had fewer women, but the abuse was even worse. The documents showed rape was organized according to military rank and racial prejudice. The liberation of the Dutch East Indies, happening at the same time as Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, revealed another part of the system: the enslavement of European women. Among them was Jan Ruff O'Harn, born in Java in 1923, who had been forced into a brothel in 1944 at age 21. Harn had been taken from Ambarawa internment camp with 9 other Dutch women in February 1944. They were held at a comfort station in Siarang for 4 months before being moved to a camp in Batavia, where they were freed on August 15, 1945. She later broke decades of silence with her 1994 memoir, 50 Years of Silence, and testified at a U.S. congressional hearing. In 2007, providing detailed accounts of the organized nature of Japanese military sexual slavery. British and Australian forces taking control from the Japanese recorded the discovery of comfort stations all over Java. Australian naval personnel were specifically involved in returning Indonesian comfort women from Labuan, Borneo. The Bogor camp in West Java was set up only for women forced into military brothels, while Batavia camps handled 10,500 women and children during post-liberation operations. The Dutch military authorities returning to take back their colony first hid information about comfort stations involving Dutch women. Records were sealed to protect the women's honor, a decision that delayed justice and recognition for decades. When Allied medical teams checked liberated comfort women, they recorded serious health problems. According to U.S. Office of War Information Report Number 49, physical exams showed widespread malnutrition, similar to other prisoners of war, with average losses of 32% of body weight. Sexually transmitted diseases were common. Military medical reports recorded high rates of syphilis and gonorrhea, often poorly treated with toxic substances like salvon and aranamin, causing sterility and other serious side effects. Medical teams also recorded forced abortions, sterilization procedures, and severe reproductive damage from repeated sexual assault. The medical records showed organized cruelty. Women came with severe malnutrition, weighing only 60 to 70 pounds when they should have weighed 100 to 120. Diseases from lack of nutrition were common, including scurvy, beriberi, pellagra, and other conditions usually seen in concentration camps. Military medical staff gave initial treatment using new sulfur drugs and penicillin, which was a big improvement over wartime care. However, specialized psychological help for sexual trauma was almost non-existent because of the limits of 1940s psychiatry. Medical personnel wrote down what they called hysteria, melancholia, and nervous exhaustion, terms that did not fully describe what we now know as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Military doctors' signatures appeared on forced abortion records, with one document from a Philippine station showing 15 forced abortions in a single month. Sterilization procedures were recorded at many locations. The medical records showed that comfort women were seen not as patients who needed care, but as military equipment that needed maintenance. The U.S. Army's 164th Signal Photo Company provided very important visual records beyond Sean. Signal Corps photographers carefully documented liberated comfort stations across the Pacific, taking photos of the small cubicles where women were held, military-issued bedding, examination tables, and boxes of military condoms. These clinical photos, meant for intelligence work, also created a visual record of the system used for sexual slavery. The images, kept classified for decades, showed how standardized comfort stations were. Whether in the Philippines, Burma, or Pacific Islands, the stations followed similar layouts, buildings converted into small rooms, each barely big enough for a military cot, with shared washing areas and medical examination rooms. The military precision of the setup was clear in every photograph. The photographers recorded not only the facilities, but also the women at liberation. The images showed severe malnutrition, untreated injuries, and the empty stare of extreme trauma. These photographs, while trying to respect the women's dignity as much as possible, provided undeniable proof of organized abuse. The United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, UNRWA, set up in November 1943, handled the large repatriation effort. By 1946, UNRWA had 11,000 staff and ran hundreds of displaced persons camps across former occupied territories. Between May and June 1945 alone, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAF, sent home 5.25 million displaced people at a rate of 80,000 per day. However, comfort women were included with general civilian populations and received no special care. Their unclear status, neither prisoners of war, civilian internees, nor military personnel, affected everything from medical care to transportation priority. This bureaucratic limbo meant many women got only minimal help despite their severe trauma. Many women could not or would not return home. Research documents specific cases. Bibangi stayed in Okinawa after liberation, classified as a stateless Korean under U.S. military rule, later becoming an illegal alien when Okinawa returned to Japan in 1972. Korean women in China lost their native language after decades of isolation. Some married local men for protection and survival. The American Red Cross, with 7.5 million volunteers and 39,000 paid staff at its peak in 1945, provided comfort items and non-medical help through programs like the Gray Ladies, who offered psychological first aid to displaced persons. However, language barriers and cultural differences made their work less effective. The focus stayed on quickly sending people home rather than addressing trauma. Cultural stigma caused huge problems. In Confucian societies, female chastity was very important to family honor. Women who had been raped were seen as bringing shame to their families. Many families preferred to believe their daughters had died, rather than accept they had been comfort women. Catholic Philippines had similar problems, where sexual abuse victims faced social rejection. Indonesian Muslim communities also struggled to accept women who had been forcibly violated. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East's handling of comfort women showed a major failure of post-war justice. Even though the trial ran from April 29, 1946 to November 12, 1948, with 419 witnesses and 4,536 exhibits, the tribunal made only one direct mention of forced prostitution in its judgment. This involved the Chinese city of Guilin, where Japanese forces recruited women to work under the false promise of factory jobs, then forced them into prostitution. The important legal precedent instead came from the Dutch Batavia Temporary Court-Martial, which handled 4 of 171 cases. specifically about forced prostitution between August 1946 and December 1949. The Semarang incident verdict on February 14, 1948 sentenced Army Major Okarda to death and 11 others to 2 to 20 years for forcing about 35 Dutch women from concentration camps into comfort stations. Documents found in April 2007 by researchers Yoshimi Yoshiaki and Hiyapumi Hayashi showed the Tokyo Trials archives had 7 official papers proving Tokettai Naval Military Police forced women into frontline brothels in China, Indochina, and Indonesia. These documents were available but not prosecuted for 60 years. The failure to punish these crimes showed that sexual slavery was not considered important. This decision hurt survivors for decades, denying them justice and recognition while the perpetrators went free. For 46 years after liberation, comfort women stayed silent. Then on August 14, 1991, Kim Hak-soon became the first woman to publicly say she had been a comfort woman. Her press conference opened the door for survivors across Asia to speak out. Although her exact details of liberation are less documented in available records, her bravery in speaking led to a wave of testimonies that confirmed the documentary evidence American forces had collected decades earlier. In January 1992, historian Yoshimi Yoshiaki made a discovery at Japan's Defense Agency's National Institute of Defense Studies archives that changed understanding of the comfort women system. He found documents giving the first recorded proof of direct Japanese military involvement, including military orders to set up comfort stations and regulations showing direct military control and supervision. The Shanghai Expeditionary Force Diary from 1932 included senior staff officer Okabnao Saburu's entry describing the first comfort station during the Shanghai incident. These discoveries proved what survivors had said but were not believed. The comfort women system was official military policy, not just the actions of rogue units. After Kim Hak-soon's testimony, other survivors began speaking too. Yong-soo Lee, taken as a teenager from Tu, Korea, testified before the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Relations Committee in 2007. Her testimony, along with 2 other survivors, led to the passage of U.S. House Resolution 121 urging Japan to fully accept responsibility for the comfort women system. Park Young-sim, the pregnant woman in the famous Sun-shan photograph, testified at the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal in Tokyo in 2000, finally giving a name and story to one of the war's most well-known images. She described being taken at age 17 and forced to endure 3 years of sexual slavery. In 2003, she visited and identified the Nanjing Lix comfort station site where she had been enslaved before being moved to Shan. Ilchul Kang, forcibly taken to China in 1943, could not return to Korea after the war and stayed in China as a nurse until 2000. She visited the United States many times to promote awareness, and her painting Girls Being Burnt became the main idea for the feature film Spirit's Homecoming. Her story showed the long-term displacement caused by the comfort women system. The 1990s and 2000s brought huge archival discoveries around the world. American archives released declassified Signal Corps photographs showing comfort stations across the Pacific. Medical reports described organized abuse. Intelligence documents revealed military infrastructure supporting sexual slavery. In 2014-2015, Chinese archives released over 90 documents from the Kwanong Army Military Police Corps archives in Guilin. These documents proved the Japanese Army paid for purchasing comfort women, with detailed records from puppet regime banks in Manchuria, documenting payments for special personnel. Professor Su Jilang's research showed that about 200,000 Chinese women alone had been forced into comfort stations, making up 36% of all comfort women. Demographic studies showed the stations stretched from Japan and China to the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Burma, New Guinea, Hong Kong, Macau, French Indochina, Korea, and Taiwan, showing how far the system reached. The demographic breakdown showed the system's racial hierarchy: 51.8% Korean, 36% Chinese, 12.2% Japanese, with others including Filipino, Taiwanese, Indonesian, Burmese, Dutch, and Australian women. The organized system also included military structure, with high command issuing establishment orders, regional staff officers making operational plans, local military police providing oversight, and military doctors doing regular exams. Among the most shocking discoveries were disposal orders found in several locations. These orders, issued as Allied forces advanced, told Japanese troops to specially dispose of comfort women to prevent their capture and testimony. Multiple massacre sites found in the Philippines and elsewhere showed these orders were carried out. At Mapaniki village in the Philippines, the November 23, 1944 incident involved Japanese forces trying to kill comfort women before American troops arrived. Similar events happened across the Pacific, as Japanese forces retreated. Historians estimate that 75% of comfort women died, showing not only the harsh conditions, but also deliberate killing to stop testimony. These disposal orders showed that the Japanese military knew comfort women were witnesses to war crimes. The organized effort to kill them before Allied forces arrived showed guilt and how far Japanese forces would go to hide the comfort women system. Japanese propaganda greatly affected liberation efforts. Women were told Americans would torture and eat them. British accounts from Burma reported that Korean comfort women were shocked to learn the British would not eat them. This fear, deliberately created by Japanese forces, made first liberation contacts very difficult and dangerous. The propaganda had two purposes: stopping escape during captivity and encouraging suicide rather than capture. Many reports documented women being given grenades and told to kill themselves instead of being captured by Americans. This psychological warfare kept affecting women long after they were freed. The propaganda's effect was clear across liberation operations in the Pacific. Women hid from liberating troops, tried to commit suicide, or stayed in comfort stations even after Japanese forces had left. The conditioning was so strong that many women could not at first understand that Allied forces wanted to help, not harm them. As occupation forces spread across Japan in late 1945, they found evidence that comfort stations also existed in the home islands. Military authorities found records of comfort stations in Japan serving training bases and other military facilities. More shocking was the discovery that Japanese authorities had prepared similar facilities for occupation forces. The Recreation and Amusement Association, set up before American forces arrived, had recruited thousands of Japanese women as special entertainers. General MacArthur immediately banned it, reflecting moral objections and public health concerns, though enforcement was uneven. Navy documents showed the Japanese military had kept detailed statistics on comfort women throughout the war. These documents, quickly classified, revealed the massive size of the system. The careful bureaucracy, registration forms, medical check schedules, and financial records showed that sexual slavery was part of military operations at every level. One of the biggest gaps in the historical record is the lack of detailed first-hand accounts from American soldiers who freed comfort women. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project, the National World War II Museum collections, and military historical records show very little documentation from soldiers' perspectives. Several reasons explain this absence. Japanese military records were carefully destroyed at the war's end. The comfort women issue stayed taboo for decades after 1945. American military documentation focused on tactical operations, not social encounters, and many comfort women died during the war or were killed by retreating Japanese forces before liberation. The silence from American soldiers reflected both the shocking discoveries and the lack of a way to understand organized sexual slavery. The military had rules for freeing prisoners of war and civilian internees, but had no procedures for helping victims of organized rape. This gap in the system helped keep comfort women's experiences invisible for decades. From 1945 to 1991, comfort women remained hidden victims of history. Government compensation went to recognized prisoners of war and civilian internees. But comfort women, unclassified and unacknowledged, received nothing. The silence was maintained by everyone. The Japanese government destroyed records and denied responsibility. Allied governments classified documents and avoided embarrassing questions. Asian governments focused on development rather than helping victims. The breakthrough came from survivors' courage. After Kim Hak-soon's 1991 testimony, the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal in 2000 gave 64 survivors from 8 countries a forum to give formal legal testimony. Though the tribunal had no legal power, it created a full record of testimony that confirmed decades of hidden suffering. U.S. House Resolution 121, passed in 2007, officially recognized comfort women's suffering and urged Japan to formally acknowledge, apologize, and accept historical responsibility clearly and fully for forcing women into sexual slavery. This recognition, coming 62 years after liberation, showed how long the journey from rescue to acknowledgement had been. Modern studies of comfort women survivors show a 90% lifetime rate of PTSD, with 65% showing current symptoms decades later show rates much higher than Holocaust survivors, who had a 39% prevalence. These numbers confirm the severe psychological trauma that military medical personnel documented but did not fully understand in 1945. The organized nature of the comfort women system is shown by its scope. Operations ran from 1932 to 1945 across territories covering the entire Japanese Empire. Standard rules were copied across thousands of facilities, with military logistics including transportation, medical services, and financial management, and racial hierarchies built into procedures. The numbers tell the story of industrial-scale sexual slavery carried out with military precision and careful bureaucracy. The system's very size, standardization, and documentation became the proof that eventually confirmed its existence, even after decades of denial. The evidence survived despite efforts to destroy or hide it. Military translator reports, Signal Corps photographs, medical records, and intelligence documents created an archive that could not be erased. When survivors finally spoke, their testimonies matched records hidden in classified files, giving verification that turned hidden history into recognized truth. Every captured rule, every photographed comfort station, every translated document helped build an undeniable case. The careful bureaucracy the Japanese military used for sexual slavery became proof of systematic war crimes. The very documents meant to organize exploitation became evidence of atrocity. American soldiers who found comfort stations probably never imagined their routine documentation would later be crucial evidence in a decades-long fight for truth. Their photographs, reports, and translations created an archive that survived attempts at denial and forgetting. What seemed like routine military documentation became historical evidence demanding acknowledgement. As of 2024, fewer than 20 Korean comfort women survivors are still alive. Their testimonies, confirmed by documentary evidence collected by American forces during liberation, stand as undeniable proof of systematic war crimes. Comfort women statues now stand worldwide as silent testimony to suffering that was long denied. The comfort women found by American forces were part of one of World War II's largest war crimes. The freeing of these women, recorded in military reports, photographs, and testimonies, gave evidence that took decades to fully recognize. The organized system, standard rules, military transportation, medical services, and financial systems showed this was official policy, not just battlefield excess. The failure to quickly recognize and address comfort women's experiences reflected many institutional problems. Military bureaucracy was unprepared for organized sexual crimes. Cultural stigmas kept victims silent. Political decisions prioritized stability over justice, and gender biases minimized sexual violence. These failures made the original trauma worse, extending suffering decades after liberation. Yet the evidence survived. Photographs taken by Signal Corps units, reports filed by intelligence officers, and medical records from military doctors all confirm what survivors said for decades. The liberation American forces provided from 1944 to 1945 started a process that continues today, with survivors still seeking full acknowledgement and an official apology. The story teaches deep lessons about war, trauma, and justice. Physical freedom does not equal psychological freedom. Rescue without recognition continues suffering. Documentation without punishment allows denial. American forces who found comfort women faced something beyond their training or understanding. Yet their records created a historical archive that eventually supported justice. The women freed from comfort stations in 1944-1945 could hardly believe liberation was real, because their trauma went deeper than physical captivity. They had been told over and over that they were worthless, that death was better than their shame, and that no one would ever accept them again. Liberation challenged these beliefs, creating confusion that many never fully overcame. Documentary evidence, from Report Number 49 to the Sun Shan photographs, from ATIS translations to Signal Corps images, gives clear proof of organized war crimes. The careful bureaucracy of Japanese military sexual slavery, captured in Allied intelligence files, cannot be denied. As the last survivors pass away, their testimonies become more valuable, supported by every document, photograph, and report created by American forces. The comfort women who could not believe their liberation understood a deep truth. True freedom meant not just taking people out of captivity, but also rebuilding their humanity. Not just opening doors, but recognizing what happened behind those doors. Not just surviving, but being believed. Their decades-long fight for recognition continues the liberation process that American soldiers started 80 years ago. Today, the evidence is clear. The testimonies are confirmed. The organized system is proven. The journey from physical freedom to recognition is one of history's longest fights for justice. This fight is supported by the archive of Truth American Forces, created when they first found the shocking reality of Japan's comfort women system. Their first disbelief at liberation showed that being free from captivity was only the start of a much longer path toward justice, recognition, and healing that continues today. The American soldiers who discovered these women recorded one of history's largest organized war crimes. By keeping evidence of these atrocities, they did more than military duty. They bore witness to the truth that demanded recognition, even if that recognition took decades. The comfort women's story challenges us to face hard truths about war, gender, and justice, reminding us that liberation is not a single moment, but a process. For these women, that process is still unfinished, even as their numbers shrink and time runs out for full justice to be done.